Hello, hello, and welcome everybody. I already see the chat room definitely filling up. I am so excited. Welcome, you guys. This is Outpost Gray, a YouTube channel designed to provide you an information in cybersecurity. I almost forgot what I was getting ready to say. In cybersecurity, technology, and innovation. I'm your host, Jack Scott, and tonight, as always, we have an amazing guest. But before we jump into it, I definitely have some admin things. Do you guys see what I'm wearing? This is awesome. If you haven't done it, definitely go to Simply Cyber, check out his gear, pick up a sweatshirt. He's got t-shirts, sweatshirts, baseball caps, stickers, mugs, everything and anything. And I think a few people in the chat have already purchased their gear. So definitely post in what you've got. Thank you, Jessica. I love this. This thing is awesome. It is a crop top. So if you're a fan of crop tops, I actually love this color because it's not white. It's like an off-white. And I will tell you the material and everything, amazing. So definitely go out there and purchase something, and then make sure you take a picture and tag Gerald Ozier in what you purchased on LinkedIn. That would be awesome. And the other thing is, if you haven't seen it already, InfoSec Live is doing another amazing career day event on March 4th. It's going to be kicking off, I think it's at 12 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's 5 hours. I'm pretty positive it's 5 p.m. I keep mixing up the time zones, but 12 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on March 4th. You don't want to miss that. We have a great lineup of individuals. And if you've seen them, they've been coming out. And one more individual that we have to announce. I'm really looking forward to it. We should be announcing her in the next couple of days. And then also, I want to just take a moment for everybody who is very consistent to my community that not only supports Outpost Gray, which is supporting me, but you make the time to show up for these live streams, and it means the world to me. And I love it. I'm so grateful for it. I love seeing James. You're always number one in here. Keith, so happy to see you. Michelle, Christoph, Jess, Kimberly, everybody, you guys, you're the reason that I do this. And I love the feedback that I get in my DMs from these live streams. So it's definitely very much appreciated. So without further ado, what are we going to be talking about today? All right. So we are going to be talking about OT and IT. And a lot of individuals don't know what OT is and what the difference of operational technology is versus informational technology. So I'm really excited because the guest that we have on the show today is the infamous Chip, and I'll have him share more about his background, but he has an extremely robust background. He is known as a hacker, a pen tester. He's also an investigator. He's a teacher and so much more. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and pull him on the stage, and you guys, we're going to dig on into this. Woo, that worked. It happened. That was awesome.
Technology is a beautiful thing when it all comes together.
That was great. That was a first time go right there. First time at this. Chip, welcome. How are you? I'm so excited
Doing great.
for this.
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing today?
I'm excited. You and I were chatting about this offline about OT and IT and understanding the different systems. But before we dive in, first off, what's up with the mask? What's going on with it?
Well, the reason why I have to wear a mask is for my own identity and protection, because the Chinese have some really good facial recognition software. And I've been doxxed 3 times last year, and the good news is one of the persons that doxxed me is finally going to serve time in prison. So it's for safety for myself, safety for my family, safety for people not knowing where I live, so forth. So that is the reason why I have to wear the mask. So the running joke is like I'm the Banksy of cybersecurity and OT cybersecurity, because I go to very great lengths, to protect my identity, and to protect the data that I have and that I share, and the locations where I live. So that is a very, very big thing with me, is making sure that my family members, and myself are safely and secure and don't have to worry about, a Chinese or Nicaraguan death squad showing up at my house, to kill me.
So Tell a little about how you, because I'm not wearing a mask, so we definitely have different backgrounds in our career space. So what do you do? What can you share with us that has put you in this spot to need to do that type of protection for you and your family?
Well, I work for a three-letter agency, and that agency goes to very great lengths to make sure that we are protected, and make sure that our information, our personal information, and a lot of our stuff is actually, taking, at great lengths taken care of. And we don't want that, out there into the generalized public, for them to be able to dox us, steal my intellectual property and stuff that's actually out there. So that's part of what's called an NSL, a national security letter, which I had to sign, and part of the SLA, with the company that I actually work with, that I will try to protect my identity at all times for anything that I publish, and anything that I'm on, a line for. So that's one reason why I have to do that, is, to kind of make sure that not only am I protecting myself, but I'm protecting the company that I work for, and protecting, the intellectual properties and stuff that I have my name associated with.
Okay, no, totally get that. So let's talk about OT and IT. But before we dive in, can you take a moment to explain what is an OT versus IT? What is that difference? What does that mean?
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. I get this question a lot. So the first thing is IT is, of course, your data centers, your normal infrastructure that you deal with, routers, switches, computers, servers, so forth, regular operating systems that you deal with, from Windows to Linux, some Unix, of course, and Apple-based products as well. So that's your IT world. Okay, now let's shift over into OT. OT is operational technology. It's what I call the invisible technology that you never see. For example, your lights, your water, power, your toilets flushing, industrial controlled
Hmm.
systems, as they're otherwise known as. In other words, they're your power plants, the hydric electrical power, your nuclear power, these, all the way from the lights that you flip on, for your light switch, all the way that, there's power that's behind that, all the way down to traffic lights, stuff that regulates, power in the industry, that gets, power to your house, your digital meter. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of these endpoints, and it's everywhere. You just don't realize it. It's
Hmm.
even in your car. There's a hard drive in your car. If you got a Tesla, good for you. Congratulations, you have a hackable device that you're driving around in. So as I tell people, it's IoT and OT technology, that is basically stuff that you use that affects the real world. It affects you as a human being. It affects the physical world. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of hackers that say, oh well, that doesn't really exist. Well, yes, it does. If I turn off power to your house, congratulations, I affected the physical world. So there you go. And that's what I do. That is my job, is to think of these wonderful hellscapes, and horrible things that you can do to this technology, that can affect the physical plane or the physical world. And that starts, at level zero. As I tell
Hmm.
people in the ISO model, it starts at the beginning part.
Hmm.
All the way from the physical device, what it is in code. And some of the manufacturers that you're dealing with is like Siemens, ABB, General Electric, Schneider Electrical. These are companies, that a lot of, people don't normally hear about and work with.
So OT, I want to dive into something that you said on like some of the, you were talking about vulnerabilities in a Tesla vehicle. Let's take that to a little bit larger scale and let's look at it from our industrial systems, because
Sure.
this is a big area that is known for, when a lot of people, when I think of OT, I'll speak for myself. When I think of OT, I usually think of our operational systems within industrial environments such as SCADA and
Hmm.
running those type of environments.
Exactly right.
And there is a lot of talk right now about them being extremely vulnerable, those systems being extremely vulnerable. I'm curious, who do you think would want, or why would somebody want to target one of these OT devices?
Ooh, 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 a state nation, as
And
I
what would
tell
the
people.
benefit be if they were to target one of these devices?
So let's go back in the Wayback Wind machine, roll things back to, for example, what you see on the news. And I've said this, Chris Roberts has said this, Mike Jones has said this, people on your show probably says, we are in a cyber geopolitical war right now. People don't believe it, but it's not on the news reported as much. But for example, in the Ukraine, the Ukrainians or did have and still do have, OT technology or SCADA based technology that's considered relatively old, and the Russians use that as a testing bed for a lot of their, SCADA-based viruses and a lot of their cyber attacks. And the Ukrainians have been beat up over the years. One was called Dark Energy,
Mm-hmm.
which you can Google and look up. The second one was called Sandworm, where they actually took, the entire country offline with a $40 piece of malware that you could literally buy off the dark net. So who in the world would not want to have, what state nation like Iran, China, and the Russian state, with all of their different threat actors that they actually have within that, and what I call the stands, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, these people don't necessarily like us that much, and other what I consider to be terrorist actors want that software to where they'd be able to knock out the East Coast, for example, especially when we're having a bomb cyclone or having, people that are having to, deal with, extraneous use on electrical and power grids during a snowstorm or during a heat wave, to knock those things actually out and cause impending doom and death. The example I give in the United States is when the Texas power grid went out a couple of years ago, you had 200 people die. That's a bad day. That's a bad day for
Yeah.
everybody, just because they didn't have power.
Yeah.
So imagine if I did that on, for 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
and as I tell people, everybody's 3 days or 3 meals away from anarchy.
Yeah.
And when the toilets can't flush, the power's not on, there's no internet, there's no commerce,
Yeah.
things can very easily devolve into anarchy.
Yeah. So what is because you sent me a video. I listened to most of it in the background while I was working today. And some of the things they said, they talked about the grids. And I knew that we had certain grids, but I didn't realize, I guess I'd probably forgotten, but we have 3 specific grids within the United States. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then there's food supply talking about,
Yep.
like, what does our food supply look like if our supply chain and one of those grids were taken off within a couple of days, it would be complete anarchy, and we wouldn't have the infrastructure set up from the government's perspective to be able to support it. I mean, look what's happened with different natural disasters that we've had.
Right.
COVID, for example. I mean, really a perfect example. And we've
COVID,
seen,
Hurricane Sandy, Katrina. I mean,
yeah.
I can list thousands of problems that we've had. We in the United States, unfortunately, are a very reactive based
Mm-hmm.
society. Until we get our teeth kicked in with a baseball bat, or our heads bashed in, we don't really listen. We don't prepare, the way we should. If you think the supply chain's now bad, I mean, and it's really bad. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the COVID has shown through a pandemic how bad it is. So imagine if the power was out with a pandemic. So you're really looking at, how the supply chain is going to suffer. How is food going to come in and be, looked at, registered, digitally, entered into the system to be, put onto a train and then taken to supermarkets and then bought? I mean, you start literally like, how did that banana or how did that apple get here? And then you follow where the food came from. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a huge, huge, gigantic issue when you look at it between that. Not only that, you look at, how meat is processed,
Yeah.
how, and it's a very, very delicate system, and it's all SCADA based.
Yep.
It's all system acquisition based. It's all power based. It's all electrical based. It's all internet based. And we live in Jax. We live in the biggest glass house. I mean, we do. We
Yeah.
have taken the internet and we have evolved that and we have used that and we have integrated that with a lot of technology, but we didn't think that people were going to weaponize the internet and use that, against these systems. Well, history has proven that, this is, a new weaponized based environment that we're dealing with that a lot of people have not addressed from a security standpoint.
Yep, it is, and it's so everybody understands too, and you're a lot more educated on this than I am, Chip. But through my understanding, my research in this space and understanding SCADA systems and the vulnerabilities, these systems are really, really not only legacy in a lot of ways, but they're extremely robust and they're interconnected. So trying to do patching is it's nearly impossible, because if you patch something, you could take out an entire system
Yes.
we're in the same situation again. And the adversaries know this. And so you've got to find a solution on how do we work on these systems and patch these systems, but keep them online. And so this is tied into a question that Jess asked, and I thought this was a really good question. Are there any DFIR tools that work with the SCADA system that you know of?
Well, you have to define DFIR in a SCADA-based system because each one is proprietary.
Mm-hmm.
Each one is completely different. Medical is different, in its technology versus power consumption and power distribution. Same thing for water versus water treatment. Water and steam. It's really hard to say that in the terms of I've got this one use tool, or one use way of being able to do some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So as I tell people, when you look at SCADA-based systems, anybody that works in this field will tell you the number one priority is safety. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Security is the aftermath of safety. Okay. So the example I always give is somebody drops dry ice on the floor, right? That is an event. We look at the event, right? So how do I contain that? How do I pick it up? I don't pick it up with my hands, right? That could rip the skin off,
Right.
So, if it's a spill, how do I contain that? How is that, event measured? So looking at it from the traditional way of IT security is completely different than what you have to look at it from OT security. Because in IT security, what's the first thing that we think of? We think of security, right? Is the data. The data is the commodity, and that's what we have to protect, right? Between firewalls and all this other kind of stuff that's integrated with it. In SCADA-based systems, it's the event, because this event can trigger more events. So as you said, these things are interconnected, right? So if I take out one system and I say patch it, to the newest level and everything, and I have it tested that in the sandbox, it might cause, multiple cascading events that could cause something to either go down, explode, leak.
Yep.
The example I give is a code generation of power. It's a jet engine, huge jet engine, normally made by Siemens, Rolls-Royce, so forth. It spins at 700 miles an hour to generate power, right? So if I slam the brakes on that thing, with a patch, it's going to explode. You can go to Operation Aurora. You can Google these things. You can see what Idaho National Labs did when they took a diesel electric engine, put it on the internet, and they just basically said on off, basically air handed. It blew up. I mean, it was smoked and everything. 60 Minutes did a piece on it. Leslie Stahl talked about it. I mean, it was a huge, gigantic thing. For the first time ever, we saw something like this happen. So no difference here. If I slam the brakes on a thing 700 miles an hour, it's going to explode, and there will be a 50-foot by 40-foot hole in the ground, and fan blades will shoot about 2 miles up in the air and come raining down on people and buildings. That's a bad day. That's a bad day for everybody.
That would not be good.
That'd be really, really bad, because that explosion will be cascading, right? So that could affect, a power system, a power plant. That could affect, a coal burn, facility that burns coal for power. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So it's the hellscape of, what do I want to be able to throw into this that's going to cause, traumatic or cascading based issues.
Yeah, speaking about like what do we want to throw in there to create catastrophic effects?
Correct.
What are the most capable threat actors out there that could target our systems? I know of a few, but what are your thoughts? Like, and out of those, why would they want to attack us? Why would they want to come after our industrial systems?
Well, it's very scary because, I mean, it's a tit for tat warfare, as much as I hate to admit it, but we are at the crossroads whether we decide whether we want to do something like that. Okay. I hope we never do. I hope I don't have to live in a world, or you have to live in a world, where it becomes the norm of attacking SCADA based systems. It's just the sheer will of who's going to do it first. Okay. If Iran, for example, turns off, the power grid or does something to us, that's considered to be an act of war. Okay. And
Yep.
we're really looking at it at that crossroads of, is it right or is it wrong to be able to do this? Do we make a treaty that everybody signs that says, okay, I can bomb your country, and blow all your stuff up, but you can't attack cyberly my country's infrastructure, right? Or if you invade a country, do we turn off their power? Is that on the table? And I hope we don't come to that precipice to where we have to make that decision, or the decision makers or the generals or whoever it may be, to say it's now going to become, part of our attack profile to do something like this, and I hope we don't ever have to cross that bridge. I hope we don't have to cross the Rubicon on that, because, that opens up the gateway. Well, if they can do it to me, I can do it to them, right? And if they can probe my network and find out what systems are critical to my country, I can do that to theirs, and back and forth and back and forth. We're just, I'm just saying, that we're at that point to where someone can sit there with their finger on that button ready to go. And it's damn hard. I mean, as I hate to say it, it's hard to make that decision. But we have regulations for nuclear war. We have regulations for chemical warfare. In my lifetime, I would love to see something to where we can say we will not weaponize the internet to be able to use attacks. Now, that's probably never going to happen, but, to a certain level, I hope we do, to where we say we will not weaponize the internet to attack SCADA-based systems of your infrastructure, only unless it becomes a hot to cold war, and it turns into kinetic warfare. And I hope we never see that happen, but I take things with a little bit of critical, and cynicism when I say that, because if a terrorist group decides to do something like that, or a threat actor or a state nation decides to do that, that's one of the first things they talk about. Is they talk about taking out SCADA-based systems. We've heard this everything from white nationalists, and terrorist groups within our own country, and we've heard this from threat actors outside, the United States. That we want to be able to attack the infrastructure. We want to be able to turn these things off, because it takes long periods of time to spin these things back up. You just can't control alt delete a power system. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did. And if you blow one up with it, you're talking a lead time between 1 to 3 years to get these products back, up in service, from parts. I mean, if you blow up a cogen, for example, that I just gave, you're talking a 2 to 3 year lead time to get one of those things made to be replaced back into the system. They weigh 40 tons, they're big. It's not like you can go to Walmart and Sam's and buy one, and plug it back in. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. And you got a lot of companies that don't keep these things in stock because they're one-offs. They don't.
Yeah.
They're very proprietarily based systems. So yet again, we go back to, do or we don't cross that road.
Yeah, that's the question. And I have a feeling that we're not going to cross the road until we're pushed over it. And I think that that's going to happen when there's a large scale attack, because right now nothing's happening because nothing has happened. Like you said, we're very reactionary, but I'm afraid that when something happens, it's going to be too late, and it's going to be the loss of life, probably possible infrastructure destroyed, multi-billion dollars lost. Our economy impacted, large segments of the United States could be taken out. Like, that's the scale if a grid was impacted. And the vulnerabilities that are in SCADA systems are very well known. This isn't a secret at all. You can just Google and find these documents. What can we do to secure these systems? Like, what are your thoughts? I know I have my thoughts on some ideas. I've thrown them around, but the gray hairs, the people that have been fighting this for a while, are just like, it's not that simple. But I'm like, we have to do something. And so, yeah, I have my thoughts. I'd like to get your thoughts. Like, what can we do today to start securing these systems outside of patching? Like, I'm talking about network segmentation, like putting them in a Tor environment, getting them off of the network, but allowing them to still get those have that connectivity to the machines that need to have it, to the host machines that actually need to have it. But a lot of the system doesn't need to be attached completely out to the internet, only certain machines. But yeah, that's political too, though. When you try to go down that's another thing. It's super political with there's different organizations that run and have compliance within this space that make it challenging to get these systems updated.
You got FERC, NERC, SIP. I mean, you got whole theme park, of regulatory commissions that are based
Yep.
around this, and it's a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's a double-edged sword. CISA and DISA basically now are the end all be all in the government side of things. But then you look at this power and some water, and a lot of these companies, don't have to follow some of those rules because they are not they do have to follow them to a certain extent, but they are private entities. They're not regulated by the government. They're not owned by the government. They are private institutions, private power consumption, and private power distribution networks. The example in my area, Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, right? Not owned by the government. They distribute a lot of power throughout the Tennessee Valley into Mississippi, Arkansas, Mississippi, other states that are around that single area. Well, they buy bulk electricity from two other parts of the power grid, including part of the power grid from Texas. So you might be sitting at home somewhere within the southern states, and congratulations, your power might be coming from Texas or the East
Hmm.
Coast, or from Florida or from somewhere. I mean, you don't know exactly where it's coming from. So that's where a lot of that track and trace actually comes from, to be able to do these things. Now, the first part is that one, you've got private entities that are, not necessarily forbearing to follow a lot of those rules. The second thing is the rules have changed. This year, they have come down like a hammer with the new cyber modernization and infrastructure plan that's just been signed into law. That, and that's a green paper problem. That's what I tell people, it's money, and it takes a lot of money to change some of these things out. It's complicated. It's vendor based. It's one off systems. It's highly. I mean, when you're dealing with 5,000 endpoints, that's a normal facility. That's a lot of turning screwdrivers. That's a lot of work, and that's a 2 to 3 year plan. Sometimes 5 year plan. If it's a bigger facility, it might be a 7 year plan. Now, who's going to pay for all that? Do we
Hmm.
pass that on to the customers? Do we pass that on to the taxpayer? Do we pass that on to, I mean, the list goes on. That's a lot of the politics that are involved with a lot of those things that you're talking about, that I completely understand. The flip side of that coin, though, too, is that, we have done this to ourselves. We could have started this 10 years ago,
Yeah.
but it wasn't really going to need back then. There really wasn't a lot of attacks back then. And these systems are meant to be old. A BAS, building automation system, you normally don't have to change those out between 7 to 10 years. So day one after you get it implemented up and going, you need to start saving, start changing that out within 7 to 10 years. Not wait 7 to 10 years for it to break before
Yeah.
you start replacing
Yeah.
it. So, we didn't really learn that formula, right? Because it wasn't considered to be a security need at the time, right? We didn't consider that to be an issue 5 to 7, 10 years ago, knowing that something like what we're seeing today was going to happen back then. Now, should have we? Could we? We could have said, run those scenarios. Plus, infrastructure cost when you start dealing with these things takes a lot of manpower, takes a lot of time, and sometimes is vendor based. So sometimes you're stuck, using their technology, and you can't change no matter what. So if you want to change and they don't have that solution, sometimes you cannot commingle those systems. That you have to wait for them to catch up, before you can institute that change.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you is it's going to be a mix. There's going to be more congressional push on this. And I could even foresee something like a CMMC structure being implemented and then vetted vendors to be able to utilize to come in and secure these environments. And I'm actually very surprised we haven't seen anything being spoken about this happening, because I feel like right now, at least the individuals I've talked to, a couple of them in the industry, it's still very much at the phase of just talking about the problem.
It's a dirty secret. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a dirty secret. Nobody wants to talk about it, and we're ashamed of it. Okay. But being ashamed doesn't necessarily mean that you're secure, and the other thing, though, too, it's not convenient. We have built a lot of convenience into our lives, especially around our cell phones and computers and tablets and so forth. This is one of those things that impedes on your convenience. Like if I told you your power is going to be out for 3 days, what are you going to do? You're going
Yeah.
to freak out. What do you mean my power is going to be out for 3 days? Well, you should have provisions and stuff saved up for at least 3 days to where you don't have to go to the store, or you should have water for 3 to 4 days. For ex-military people like myself, MREs, meals ready to eat. You got that stuff kind of saved up, knowing that you might need, or even better yet, do you have like at least 4 packs of ramen noodles that can last you for a couple days?
Yeah.
You know,
You can go
or
out to eat. It's okay.
yeah,
Like,
you could go out. I
there'll
mean,
be things. Yeah.
you're going to figure a way out, but it's going to impact your life. It's
Yeah.
going to be an inconvenience. So, when you start tooling around with some of these systems and stuff, it's very inconvenient for the user, and I fight for the user. So when you're impacting somebody, at their home or their business or their internet or so forth, the atypical nature is for people to freak out,
Hmm.
and that's the knee jerk reaction that we're dealing with here now, is that, hey, we've gone so long, so far, so fast. We have no other choice, for these things to affect your life,
Yeah.
and it's got to be brought to the forefront because everybody's talking about IT technology. Oh, cyber this,
Mm.
cyber that. And I'm all for that. Don't get me wrong. We need, hot pink, purple plaid women, I don't care what you are, an alien in cybersecurity. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for that 110%. And there's thousands of people that are involved with that, if things go sour. But in our world, in OT, if things go bad, we're in the hundreds. And that's the scary thing, is that there's not a theme park of people that are graduating from colleges working in an OT technology. This stuff, is, ladder logic is not taught like C++ and, HTML and Python. It's a it's a dead language, that's proprietary, only based in certain systems. And
Yeah. And
that's
what we're,
that's the educational thing that I always scream about. Is like, hey, you need to integrate, some of your OT technology teachings, and this is also what we call vocational school, and people don't want to hear about VOTech programs, they want to hear about how to become a red hat, or a black hat hacker so they can go catch bad guys. Well, that's
Mhm.
great and all, but when you graduate from a university, you're not going to start out doing that immediately. That
Yeah.
takes 5 to 8 years to break into the pen testing, cybersecurity market.
Yeah. If you want to be
Where I've been
good.
doing it 26 years, and I'm going to win over you any day.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely takes a long time. Something I want to draw out that you were talking about is the IT side. You're talking about, and like I found this very interesting when you were talking about like IT side. We have like EDR, and we've got a ton of MSSPs, and we've got, everybody pushes like employee training, multi-factor authentication, and maybe I just don't hear about it because I'm not in the OT space. But it's not. I don't. Are there vendors that are specifically focused on providing the same level of security for the OT, or is it minimal in comparison to what we see for the IT space?
Well, this is the new hot button, buzzword kind of thing. It was cloud one year and an AI one year. OT cybersecurity now is coming to the forefront as a huge cash cow. So you've got like the Deloittes, the Accentures, the SAICs that are jumping on the bandwagon, to secure, and they're spinning up teams, to start getting into O technology. You also got companies like Waterfall and Dracos and stuff that have, managed services that are providing this into the space. And then you got hardware vendors,
Mm.
because a lot of this stuff
Yep.
is hardware based. I mean, a lot of this goes to, and this is where I get a little ISO model here, is you start at level 0, and then you got 2.5 that's in the ISO model, and then a 3.5. After 4, we don't care, because really that doesn't affect an OT SCADA based system. So anything above level 4 for us really doesn't really, we don't really care. I mean, to be honest, when we get into that 2.5 layer and that 3.5 layer, and you can Google that all day long, you'll start seeing how OT technology starts integrated with those things.
Mm.
So you've got companies like Tempered, that make one-way gateway diodes, to where the technology only goes one way in and one way, out. That's it. It doesn't traverse back at all. So there's a lot of things that you have to do. So I mean, it is a huge undertaking, because you're talking about, how do we integrate zero trust? Well, some systems you can't integrate zero trust. Latency is a huge thing with, when we're dealing with the, SCADA based systems. So some systems can't have multi-factor authentication. You can't do it because the latency will kill that actual process to that actual, SIM, or that SCADA-based system, and it's nothing more than a memory card. That's all it is. It's all it is. It's a memory card in there. It's like a dummy dump terminal. It's like a thin client. And it just takes that arm and pushes that box off. And that's what it does. As soon as it loses its profile, it goes into a safety mode or it stops. So you might have that arm stop midway through, and the boxes pile up all day long, like in a manufacturing system. So, and where I deal with things a lot in technology with healthcare is, imagine that needle coming down, and it's grabbing just a little bit of drop of blood or something, out of a beaker, and it's coming over and it's dropping it into a sensor. It's doing that same repetitive action, time and time again, no more, no less. If it loses its profile, on that system, you might have to contact the manufacturer to reinstitutionalize or come out there, or have to remote in to fix that system, if possible. And that might be $1 million an hour billing machine. And you're talking, well, now we've turned into a DR event, or a cyber kill chain event, because what happened to cause that to lose its profile, and now we're paying, we're losing thousands and thousands of dollars, an hour, and then we're paying out the nose to get the company to come in to fix it, or to remote in based on our SLA to get that thing back up and running again. So that makes a huge, gigantic, and the other thing though too is you can't process blood or whatever you're trying to do, whether it be an MRI, or an EKG or an X-ray or something like that. And if the profile's screwed up, okay, let's just go for an X-ray machine. Let's say I screw it up and I put in too much rads into that. That means I just irradiated someone and killed them dead. So, I mean, the list of, theme parks and stuff that I draw up every day in my head that I write out and I give to these people, it's like, okay, here's the worst of the worst, bad of the bad, and they get really scared, and I tell people, it's like, look, we're not trying to fear you into buying from a vendor. We're not trying to scare you into, doing something with a manufacturer. What we're telling you is this is your pro, this is your con, and this is your risk. And that's triggered by an event, and then it goes down from there. And a lot of times for all the people that are out there that are BAs and whatnot, and all these people want to know about our stuff, we use the bow tie model. So you can Google the bow tie model and you can see how we take an event and builds that out. So, it's as I tell people, it's kind of like, a mirror attack model has been really modified, to really look at the system itself and what events it could trigger, and what it could do. So, one of the examples I did was for a water treatment facility last year. They wanted me to test their sensors. I'm on the outside. I'm from here, from my home. I got my pen testing lab over here. And they said, this is the IP address. See if you can get past it. Boom, get into the system. See what you can do. 3 days later, I was into the entire water system, for this city, and I could have dumped 4 tons of lye or ammonia into the water and killed thousands of people. And they would have never even known I was there, and they were just like, well, how did, you get past all this stuff? I was like, well, first off, I figured out what your systems were, and then I went out there and looked at the CVEs and the vulnerabilities and saw what was there and used that against your system since you gave me the IPs. And voila, I mean, not rocket science here. I mean, I could have DDoSed your system, once I found an open VPN, there you go. I mean, it's not that hard to do, and I was like, I've got the skills and stuff to get into that system. Plus I understood what your SCADA systems were once I got in. So I was able to pivot north, south, east, west to see into, what the topology looked like. And then I just started going down the line, started going down the IP addresses that I had taken onto an Excel spreadsheet. I was like, okay, this is this, and I'm just sitting there silently on the wire, just figuring out what's what. And it's like, oh, that's what that is. That's what that is. Okay, that turns this on, this turns that off. Can I get into the GUI? So let me find out what that IP address is for that system. Boom, now I'm into the GUI. Now I can do whatever I want. The controller is going to know no different, because if you've ever looked at a SCADA-based control center, you've got about 20 to 30 screens that you're looking at, plus 3 on your desk and a phone, and you've got a lot of calls and a lot of stuff that you're working. It only takes me 30 seconds for me just to make a change, and you would never even know.
Yeah.
And I could have done that from the code level, or I could have done that from the actual, GUI OS. Take your pick.
God, yeah, it's so scary. I've got comments. I have a question, but I've got a couple of comments I want to post since you You were going off. I like this, Michael. Thank you. He says, thank you so much for this live stream. I'm stepping into the field of information security, and this is the first I've heard of OT, and I'm really excited to learn more about it. So that's awesome. And then Jess, man, I'm power sharing this episode when the recording posts. This is important stuff. You've got like, yeah, everybody's just kind of like, this is good. This is resonating. I love it. So we did have a question come in.
And
Earlier,
anybody that knows me, I'm kind of like the George Carlin, when it comes down to this stuff. I don't give a shit, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, is that when people bring me in,
stuff.
Yeah, I am not very well received in our community sometimes because a lot of vendors just hate my guts. They can't stand me because I'm just going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to sit there and lie to the client. I'm not going to sit there and lie to you. I'm not going to lie to the audience.
Yeah.
I get paid to tell the truth. I have no problem telling you that your baby is ugly. I mean, I have none whatsoever. And a lot of people get a lot of the information that I try to, put out there. It's like, if you're getting into this field, it's great. The pay is awesome there. And trust me, the stability is not going, it's there, it's not a very volatile system, to where every couple of years, like the healthcare industry, it's going up and down and regulation and deregulation and so forth. And there's a lot of room, and a lot of people I really want to see kind of get into this because Jax, it's an open field, right? And it goes back to it's gone back to what I've said for years. No matter what you do, you can't screw up because it's better than what they've had before.
Yeah. It's a very interesting and very interesting way of putting that. Okay, so Shanna, I hope I said one of those right. Is there a viable path for a former refinery operator into the OT security? Do you have any advice on that?
So, like, I come from this field, so I understand exactly where they're coming from. You really need to take a look at, and I will give it to you. There's certain classes that you need to be able to take and prove, and certain books that you need to be able to be accustomed to, and rules and regulations that that the industry lives and goes by. So it's just like this. It's like hacking, a bank, or hacking, anything else that that's in the cybersecurity world. If it's a very Doric system, which OT security is a very Doric system, once you know how to bob and weave, through those pillars, you're in. You know the talk, the lingo. And the thing though too is I tell people, is like, where do you want to point your career? Do you want to point it towards the nuclear regulatory? Do you want to point it towards water treatment? Do you want to point it towards, corporate? I mean, there's corporate environment like you wouldn't believe. So if you like living in a cubicle and doing PowerPoints, I mean, there's room for you too. Trust me. Do you want to push white papers? Do you want to deal with regulation? Do you want to be in field operations where I was? I mean, I was actually turning the screwdriver on some of this stuff. And I mean, I learned it from the 0 level on up.
Wow.
Because I had my hands in it, so I understand what tool coming down means. I hope you got your hard hat on, because, whatever's coming down ain't gonna hurt. So, I learned, I was, on scaffolds, and I was running around power treatment facilities and running to all these different places and fixing all this stuff. So, I cut my teeth on oil rigs. That's where I cut my, teeth in the OT world. Was I learned about how oil rigs work, and I worked for Gulf Shore International for, 3 years, as a contractor. So, there's a theme park, of things that you've got to learn and you need to learn. And Jax, I'll send those to you in the chat. And, these things, once you learn them and once you learn how to bob and weave in that industry, and as long as you have a good resume and you've had your hands in it for a while, and you've got your certifications and you've got your education and you know what you're doing, and you can prove that, the field is completely open to you to what you want to do.
I love that. Yeah, you heard it here, folks. Get into OT. That is a great segue into Cybersecurity Central's question. What made you get into cyber, and especially in the OT space?
Well, I have to say it was completely monetary. I had graduated college and I was broke. I mean, I was talking like broke. And to kind of date myself, September 11th happened when the year I graduated, and I was like, I want to support the war effort. I grew up in a military family, and my dad would not let me join the military, period. Would not let me do it. And I was like, Dad, you're Vietnam veteran, and you've worked for the 3 other agencies and everything. He's like, no, son, you got to realize that private over there is making X amount of dollars, and then this company is going to pay you 3 times as much to do the exact same thing, and he's got to fight, but you don't have to. So it's dependent up to you. Do you want to be an armed military contractor? Do you just want to be a regular contractor? So, and at the time, the three-letter agencies were just, grabbing everybody they could to come in, and I got caught when I went to a private company. They said, yep, you can be an armed military contractor. We'll send you off for training. You're going to work with special forces. You're going to do all this kind of stuff. And this is your pay rate. And I was like, awesome, because I'm 22 at the time and I'm practically living in my car. I mean, I was eating at a homeless shelter. I was literally at a friend's house in his backyard taking a shower with Dawn dishwashing liquid in a hose. I mean, like I was, I mean, dirt ass poor. And I mean, I grew up poor. So, I mean, I know what poor tastes like. It's got no color, hot, pink, purple, brown, doesn't matter. Poor is poor. It affects everybody. So I had no other, I was like going, I mean, this is a great career choice. First off, I get to learn, first off, I get to go to other countries and do stuff, possibly kill people, don't know, and I get to learn about OT and IT technology, which was the field that I was wanting to go into. And it was just a theme park, that had just opened up for me, because as soon as I got, out of country and everything, they're like, can you learn this system? Absolutely. Give me the book, give me the stuff, send me the classes, ready to go. 2 months later, I'm working in that system. Hey, can you do this? Absolutely. Just sign me up. I'm ready to go. Show me this. I mean, my thirst for knowledge, is always there. And when I started doing that, the people I was working with started recommending me for more, roles and responsibilities. And I became a red team leader, and then after working with red teams, I worked with blue teams. Then I started working with the CAG. Then I started working with CENTCOM. Then I started working with more people in special forces. Then I started working with IT and OT people. Then I started working with specialized vendors. And I mean, every time that I had an opportunity to better myself and to learn something new, sign me up. I'm, and I did that for the better part of 18 years till I came back to the United States. Because, I had been shot twice, stabbed 3 times, hit with an IED. I went through 7 major surgeries, and I said, I would like to, now I'm getting a little older and a little softer in the head. I'm not young anymore. It's time for me to come back, and establish myself, here in the U.S. I built out, once I also was in the process of getting married, wanted to have a family, wanted to have a child. So in 2015, I built my server room that I have here at my house, and I said, I can do all this remote. And that's what I've been doing since 2015 for, as a contractor, until I found, this company that I work for now, which said, you're the guy. We want you. Come on in,
That's awesome.
and I said the money was right, the benefits were right, and I was like, I can work 100% remote. I don't have to travel anymore, and there's certain restrictions that have been put on me because I got what's called a red notice from Interpol, if you know what that is. Most people don't. That says that, hey, these countries want you dead. It's like, you can never go to China. Wasn't planning on it,
Yeah, no, it's cool. Yeah.
And I had spent the better part of 2 years investigating the CLO and the war as drug cartels. So it's like, you can't go to Mexico. And it's like, you're under an NSL and there's the countries you can't go to. Here's the dirty 30 list. Like, you can't book a trip to like Iran. I was like, well, I was planning on doing that for my summer vacation. What the hell?
Mali.
That's
Yeah, you can't
totally
go to
fine.
Mali now. Or yeah. It's so random.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna cut you off because I've got a list of questions, and we've got
Sure.
only about 9 minutes, and I know some of the folks definitely want you to answer some of these. So shout out to Samir. He's actually writing in from Saudi Arabia, catching the show. So that's awesome. Thank
Hey,
you.
you used to work for Saudi Aramco. Love your company.
So can you share I think, some takeaway lessons from the recent attacks and what can be done?
Well, it is a sense of preparedness, and I got to meet with a lot of different people in our industry, and our government is very ill prepared. And one of the things is like they have a white binder on a shelf somewhere that tells them, "Hey, this is what we're supposed to do." Okay, that's for the government. That's not necessarily for the people. We need to start talking about this in the public sector. We need to start talk. Every time that we have a cybersecurity conference, we need to be talking about OT technology and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
If we can hack cars, by God, they can hack, guess what? The power grid.
Yeah.
If they can hack voting machines and influence elections, guess what? They can influence power companies, water treatment facilities, so forth. God help us, if they start learning, how to get into nuclear reactors, and that's where the real scare begins, because you're talking Chernobyl-like effects here,
Yeah.
people. I mean, when they start learning about, ABB and how to hack into Westinghouse systems, we're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
There's, we are, that is a bad day for everybody in the United States, because when they start blowing up nuclear reactors and hacking nuclear reactors, we really got a problem. Water treatment facilities, power grids, and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
so forth. I mean, these things, like I said, they're all interconnected. It's one huge, gigantic, flat network, if you want to imagine it like that. So once it's like a hub. Once you get into one, once you get into all of them. So
Very true. Michael, I love this question. I'm a big book advocate myself, and I actually threw a book in the chat earlier. But what are you mentioned books and certs. What are a few books on the top of your head that anyone interested in OT should pick up? I threw Sandworm in there. I think Sandworm's a great book to read for anybody joining the industry, OT or IT. I think it's just a great book to read.
Yeah, well, everybody that's in our industry, we kind of use the Geithner book. It is the Securing Operational Technology by Andrew Geithner. The Sandworm book is
By
great.
who? I'm going to drop it in the chat. By
It's
who?
by Andrew Geithner. So if you can kind of see that one, there you go.
Okay. Oh, I get it. Okay.
Okay, there you go. That's basically the industry standard, kind of like our Bible that we all go by, and that kind of tells you about all the different systems and the networks that go with them. Sandworm is a really great book. I've got it. There's another one called Dark Energy that's out there. It's a book out there. There's also Lights Out by Ted Koppel. Which most people remember Ted Koppel. He's been an interviewer for years and years and years. He's written a really great scathing book about IT and OT technology, about what happens 4 days after, when everything gets turned off, what happens, and how do we get things back on. We're not really talking about that. We're talking about, protection now, but we also need to talk about, if things go wrong, what I do, how we're able to spin that stuff back up. What are we going to do to get things back up and running, And that is something that it's a very scary, that we don't want to talk about right now, because we're afraid to look inward at ourselves and looking at, some of the things that it could go wrong, will go wrong, and then how do we replace that? How do we fix that? And what's it going to impact? So, it is infrastructure. Don't get me wrong. It's no different than a bridge. It's no different than, putting up a new water tower. I mean, these are things that are regulated by that. And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff's hooked up to the internet. So, we really have to look at those protections. We have to look at those vendors. We have to escalate, within our minds, how are we going to look at it 3 steps, like a chess match? How are we looking at it 3 steps, ahead of time? So if I move this, what affects those other things, So in a way, there's a lot of engineering, and there's a lot of whiteboarding, and there's a lot of tabletopping that has to go into this. And if I told you it was going to be easy, I'd be lying to you.
Yeah.
It's hard. It is not for the faint of heart.
No. All right, next question. I love it. Thank you, Tom, for showing up. I greatly appreciate it. So, quickest way for somebody to get into OT security? You've kind of touched on it, but what would be the quickest route for them?
Well, the quickest way, is I tell people, you have to get your hands dirty into this, So, start looking for OT positions, start looking for, once you start getting, certain amounts of experience, because a lot of this is based on experience. I had to work as a maintenance technician for a while. Then I became a maintenance manager, and I was working in manufacturing. And then I went into power. And then once I went into power, then I went into oil rigs. And then once I went into oil rigs, and so forth. I mean, those things kind of build into themselves. And you got to have to understand the manufacturers. You got to understand a lot of the speak, because the acronyms are horrible.
Yeah.
It's like the military. I mean, they got horrible acronyms for a bunch of this stuff. So, and the other thing too is you got to pick your industry, pick your flavor, pick your poison. Do you want to, and I know Tom's very well, do you want to work in electrical? Well, you need to start learning about electrical systems. Engineering classes don't hurt, not one bit whatsoever. Any kind of vocational education and technology that you can do within that realm, about learning about power, Awesome. Learning about electrical, great. Same thing, sewage, electrical, water treatment, all those things, are vocational based systems,
Mhm.
or are vocational based hands-on stuff that you've got to be able to do. So this is not where you're doing, armchair cybersecurity, as I tell people. I mean, you're physically getting into this stuff, and understanding like, well, what's the difference between a 220 versus a 410, electrical, what's going to shock and hurt? Well, both of them are going to shock and hurt, but this one's going to kill you dead faster than this one. So, that and the security and the protocols that go into that, like, I'm OSHA certified, I'm
Mhm.
certified for hazmat, I'm certified for bloodborne pathogens, because I work a lot in the medical field. So I understand, because I worked in a medical facility, in a medical lab, I worked in a hospital. So I understand EMR systems. I understand, exactly how BAS systems work. I understand building automation. I understand heating and cooling and HVAC. So when
Yeah.
those guys start throwing those horrible acronyms out, I can tell what's reality and what's crap, so
Yeah.
I can kind of pick it apart real quick.
Yeah, I call them on BS. All right. Well, we're going to do a wrap. But before I take you off this stage, final words that you would like to leave the viewers with.
Well, the final words I want to say, this is not a scare session. This is a learning and an educational point for a lot of people. I hope this opens up your eyes, because every time, I mean, this technology touches everyday life. I mean, from your heating, your air conditioning, the water you drink, to the power you consume, for you getting, even driving around your own city, the stoplights. Imagine if all the stoplights turned red all of a sudden in New York. That's a bad day, you know, uh, from your, I mean, this is a very unregulated technology in wild field right now. It's now getting more regulation, and now is really, I tell the people, the time they need to jump in on it as fast as they possibly can, and get the schooling, the education, the certifications, and start learning this technology, because we need you people now. We didn't need you 5 years ago. I would have loved to have people 5 years ago. We really need the bodies and the people and the understanding, now more than ever, because I don't see things getting a lot easier. I see them getting a lot worse. And then on top of that, it's like one of those things. Once we start digging those layers and pulling those layers of that onion away down to that core, we're going to start seeing that, hey, we need people, we need, infrastructure, changeover needs, we need regulation, and we need education.
Mm-hmm.
Education,
Education is
education.
huge.
Read, people.
Yeah.
Education, education, education. You
Yeah.
got it. I mean, and you've got more outlets than ever in our entire history to learn this stuff. You got
Yeah.
this show. You've got, YouTube channels you can look at. You've got Google. Ta-da!
Simply
Look
cyber.
at look at
Yeah.
your shirt. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many outlets out there to start learning, and like, I want to get into OT. Okay, find out what OT is. Find out what industry you want to go into, and it's just start hounding it. And there's
Yeah.
papers and books and tons of stuff out there for you to learn and educate yourself on, be able not only creating a good career and life for yourself, but being able to, really show that I've done something to help my community.
Yeah. All right, Chip. Well, that is it. Thank you. You have been fantastic. You guys heard it here. Kimberly already dropped Chip's information for LinkedIn in the chat. Thank you for that, Kimberly. Reach out to him, contact him for anything, more questions on OT. Thank you again, everybody. Chip, you've been fantastic. Have a wonderful evening.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye. Wow, you guys, wow, that was a lot. That was very, very educational. Thank you for all of the questions. I felt like, wow, I'm not going to say that I didn't want to share that yet. I'm not going to say that I'm like scared at all, but I've definitely, my eyes have been open. I already knew that there was an issue, but now it's just been a little bit more opened a little bit wider for me to see it. So yeah, a lot of things to think about. If you're wanting to get into the field and you're thinking about breaking in, OT could be a good approach. Reach out to Chip, very knowledgeable on that. So before we dive into next week's show, I want to take a minute and thank everybody for doing the poll last week that I put out for our new times. Right now, we're hosting shows every week on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. And we're thinking about shifting them to 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. And that's after the polling that everybody participated in. I know there was a large majority that wanted the morning times, but we've decided that's probably not best, especially for our West Coast individuals who would have to get up at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning just to be at the show. So we're likely going to stay on Thursdays and shift to the right by 30 minutes. That also reminds me, right after the show, starting at 4:30 p.m. is my dear friend's show called Simply Cyber. Definitely go check that out. You will not be disappointed. And then if you felt that you received a lot of good information, that this was a beneficial episode for you, please make sure to like and then share it with others. And then if you haven't done so already, make sure that you subscribe to the page so you stay up to date for our weekly episodes. Now, next week, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this because it's being a little weird on the screen over here. I was going to try to do some fanciness. Oh, it worked. Okay. Cool. So next week, what we've got going on, Chip is still on there, but if you go right underneath Chip, you'll see Jennifer Sanders. We're going to be talking about technology and corporate law and how it's going to affect you in the space today, not just in 3 to 5 years. And then the next thing you see for us wrapping up February is the GRC panel. You don't want to miss it. This is a sizzling team that's going to be on here. We've got Erica McDuffie. We've got Jacob Horn. We've got Dr. Gerald Ogier and Linda Rust. And I'm going to be asking them some hard questions. So make sure that you show up and bring your questions. And then kicking off the first of the month in March is going to be with Simon Lindstedt, who is the founder of InfoSec Live. It's going to be one day before the career day that InfoSec Live is going to be hosting. And that event is sponsored by Valor. So really excited. It's going to be a great lineup. Thank you again for everybody showing up, engaging the guests, engaging me. I love these events, and I love them even more when I have you all here to support me. So thanks again. Have a wonderful evening. And don't forget, go and raid Simply Cyber, 4:30 p.m. I'll see you over there.